White lines are one of the most frustrating things a pattern designer encounters. It's frustrating when you spend hours illustrating beautiful motifs only to find the tiniest white lines appearing in your patterns, making them not so seamless. White lines ruin seamless repeat patterns because the lines interrupt the seams, and the whole point of repeating patterns is not having seams. This makes the pattern unusable by you or anyone who purchases your pattern to use. It can also make you feel like giving up on pattern design because it's so frustrating, especially when you don't know how to fix them. In this video, I'll show you the most common reasons that white lines appear in your patterns. I'll give you clues that can tell you the common causes of white lines, and I'll teach you how to fix the white line problem depending on what causes it. This will help you fix patterns with lines and then avoid them in future patterns, letting you enjoy pattern design more without that frustration. Experience has shown me that different apps have their own challenges when it comes to white lines. For example, Canva and Photoshop like to add pixels to the edge of your pattern tiles. Adobe Fresco frequently trips us with rendering issues, and Procreate snapping can be finicky, especially if you have shaky hands. For this video, I'm going to focus on Procreate and Adobe Fresco to demonstrate the three most common causes of white lines in patterns. The first thing to check when you see white lines is whether they're actually there or not. Some apps like Adobe Fresco and Canva will show white lines while you're designing, but they're not actually there in the final product. The lines are edge pixels that appear on your screen during editing and design, but they're only superficial and they're not there in the final product. So here in Adobe Fresco, you can see this in action. The pattern is showing white lines. However, depending on the zoom and where you place it, they're not actually there. They appear and disappear as you move the screen. And like if you zoom right in, they're kind of there, but then they're not there. And it just kind of changed. So this gives you a clue that it's purely the screen rendering. And it's common when you're using a lot of layers or if you're using a slower device or an older device. But here in Adobe Fresco, I also find that it's just an Adobe Fresco thing. Canva does it as well, so sometimes it's just purely the app that does it. I don't find it so much in Procreate, but to fix this, you can merge all of your layers together and you'll find that if it is just a rendering issue, the lines will completely disappear. So you can see there are no lines there anymore because it wasn't a pattern issue, it was a rendering issue. Another cause for white lines is using a pattern tile that is smaller than the artboard. So let's say you're creating a full page repeat pattern and you've imported a JPEG or PNG pattern tile to place them side by side. If the pattern tile is enlarged at all, you likely won't achieve a seamless repeat. This is because when you enlarge an image made of pixels such as JPEG and PNG, the app has to add new pixels in order to enlarge it. When the pattern tile is placed side by side, these semi-transparent pixels added to the edge of the tile will result in these light lines creating that visible seam. To fix it, sometimes you can overlap your tiles by 1 pixel and it removes the problem. However, it doesn't always work, so it's not reliable and probably isn't your best solution if you are selling your pattern tiles commercially. Might be fine if you're using it for your own projects though. If the overlapping solution doesn't work, then unfortunately you'll need to start again, this time creating your pattern tile on a larger artboard. And the third common cause of white lines is due to misalignment of elements or tiles. So this is pretty common when reducing your patterns down to test the seams. I'm going to demonstrate here in Procreate this time. I have a pattern tile that I've resized incorrectly, and you can see that both the pattern doesn't line up and it's also produced these white lines on the side. This is likely because one of them wasn't resized correctly, or it didn't snap into place, or it's been moved. It's really easy to do. I find particularly in Procreate, if you're using Adobe Fresco, the snapping is really effective, but sometimes the snapping in Procreate can be a little bit light. So to fix this, you can start by resizing your tiles again using a few of these different tips. Okay. To fix this, we're going to start by resizing again. So sometimes that's all you've got to do. You've just got to take a step back and you've got to start again. So I'm going to start with my inserted image, but we're going to duplicate again. Now, the first thing I want you to do is test that when you're resizing, that snapping is on. Okay, so when checking your snapping, if that's not blue, if snapping is not blue, it's not going to work because it's not snapping to the center of the frame. And I find that's really, really helpful when resizing. And my second tip is often we are resizing like this, and we're trying to resize in the middle, looking for those gold lines to indicate that we've aligned it correctly and that it's snapped. However, I want to show you a different way that you can resize. If you select the layer you want to resize, come over to the resize arrow. Let's say we want to reduce this down to the bottom right hand corner. What you'll do is you'll tap on the circle in the bottom right hand corner. Here it brings up the dimensions of your original layer. If we halve that, make sure it's linked, which by default is selected. If we halve that, say 1500 pixels, it will resize it exactly. And I find this is super helpful if, say, you've got a lot of elements and it's snapping to a lot of different things. Or if your hands are quite shaky and this is doing it this way is not really reliable. If you're a bit shaky, it's not going to help. So that is a really, really good way to resize it. Let me demonstrate for you again. Okay, so we click the resize, whichever direction you want to resize it in. So if I click this circle, this node, it will resize it that way. If I click this node, it will resize it that way, and so on and so forth. So tap the node, quickly enter your half of your dimensions, and then it will resize perfectly without white lines. Another tip, if we want to go and do that again, and this helps particularly if you have a lot of layers that you're working with, only have selected the layer that you want to resize. And what that does is it ensures that the only snapping it's doing is to the center of the frame. It hasn't got other elements on the screen that it's trying to snap with. So that way, you're not fighting so hard to resize. And once you've resized them, okay, so when I'm resizing, I haven't got all these other elements I'm trying to fight for this, for snapping rights. But then once you've got them back visible again, you've got your perfect seam, no white lines. I hope this gives you some next steps in dealing with white lines in your seamless repeating patterns. They can be incredibly frustrating, but once you learn why they appear, you can fix them and avoid them in the future. Please don't worry, it's kind of like a rite of passage for pattern designers, so if you're experiencing the white line frustration, you are definitely not alone. Please keep going and enjoy your patterns.